They rewrote history. They burned the scrolls. They chiseled the names off the walls. And for centuries, it worked. Most of us grew up learning about kings, emperors, and generals. We memorized their battles, their borders, their bloodlines. But nobody told us about the women who built the strategies those kings used. Nobody told us about the healers who understood the human mind thousands of years before modern psychology was even a word. Nobody told us that power, real power, was never just a man's story. It was hidden, deliberately, systematically. And today, that changes. Let us go back. Ancient Egypt. Around 1478 BC, a woman named Hatshepsut did something no one expected. She became pharaoh. Not queen consort, not advisor. Pharaoh. She built temples, commanded armies, expanded trade routes, and ruled Egypt for over 20 years. One of the most successful reigns in Egyptian history. And what happened after she died? Her successor, Thutmose III, ordered her image chiseled off every monument, her name erased from every record. For nearly 3,000 years, history forgot her entirely. That was not an accident. That was a strategy. Move forward to ancient Greece. Hypatia of Alexandria was a mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher in the 4th century. She ran one of the most respected schools of thought in the ancient world. Students traveled from across the Mediterranean just to sit in her lectures. She was brilliant. She was powerful. She was killed by a political mob in 415 AD, and her work was systematically destroyed. The library that held her writings was burned. Hypatia did not simply die. She was erased. Now here is where psychology enters the conversation. Because this was not random violence. This was not simply men being cruel. There is a very specific psychological mechanism at work here, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Psychologists call it threat perception and social dominance orientation. When individuals in power perceive a challenge to their dominance, the response is not always direct confrontation. Sometimes it is erasure. Remove the evidence. Rewrite the narrative. Control what future generations believe is possible. There is also a concept called representational absence. When a child grows up and never sees someone who looks like them in positions of authority, power, or genius, their brain begins to unconsciously accept that they do not belong there. It is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is insidious. And it works across generations without anyone having to say a single word. This is why the erasure of powerful women from history was not just about the past. It was an investment in controlling the future. If girls never see women in power, they stop imagining themselves there. And a mind that cannot imagine itself in power will never reach for it. That is not biology. That is a manufactured limitation. And it was built on purpose. Fast forward to medieval Europe. A woman named Hildegard of Bingen was born in 1098. She was a composer, a writer, a scientist, a mystic, and a medical practitioner. She wrote extensively about the human body, about plants and their healing properties, about music theory, about theology. She corresponded with popes and emperors. She was one of the most intellectually prolific minds of the entire medieval period, male or female. But the Church could not fully accept her authority. So they did something clever. They allowed her work to exist, but only under the framework of divine vision. She was permitted to be brilliant, but only if her brilliance was attributed to God, not to her own mind. Her intelligence had to be made invisible even while her output was celebrated. She could produce power. She just could not own it. This pattern repeated itself across continents and centuries. In Japan, in West Africa, in the Ottoman Empire, in the Americas. Wherever women rose, systems adapted not always to destroy them outright, but to reframe them, to credit their power to something or someone else. A husband, a god, a male teacher, anything but themselves. Modern psychology and neuroscience have given us something remarkable: the ability to measure what suppression does to the human brain. Research in epigenetics, the study of how environment shapes gene expression, tells us that chronic suppression of agency and identity can alter stress response systems across generations. Women who lived under sustained psychological and social domination did not just suffer emotionally. Their nervous systems adapted. Their descendants carry biological markers of that suppression. But here is the extraordinary flip side of that science. Resilience is also inherited. Studies in post-traumatic growth show that communities and lineages that survived sustained oppression often develop heightened emotional intelligence, adaptive thinking, collaborative problem-solving, and creativity. These are not consolation prizes. These are cognitive advantages, forged in survival, refined over centuries. The women who were erased from history were not victims in the simple sense of the word. Many of them were strategists of survival. They coded their knowledge into songs, into recipes, into textile patterns, into oral traditions. They hid their power inside the very domestic spaces their oppressors thought were beneath notice. They played the long game, and across generations, they won. Their knowledge survived. It just came to us in disguise. You might be thinking, that was then, this is now. And you would be partially right. The overt erasure has largely stopped. Women's names are no longer chiseled off monuments. Women are in boardrooms, in parliaments, in laboratories, in courtrooms. Progress is real, and it matters. But the psychological architecture that was built over thousands of years does not simply dissolve because the laws changed. Research in implicit bias shows that even people who consciously believe in gender equality carry unconscious associations that link authority with maleness and nurturing with femaleness. These associations were not formed by personal experience alone. They were inherited from a cultural story that was written over millennia. And here is the psychological insight that changes everything. When you know a bias was manufactured, you can deconstruct it. Not instantly, not without effort, but consciously, deliberately. The same intentionality that was used to erase powerful women from history can be reversed. You can rewrite your own internal narrative. You can seek out the names that were chiseled off the walls. You can restore what was taken. And in doing so, you expand what you believe is possible for yourself. History is not just a record of what happened. It is a tool. It has always been a tool, and for most of recorded time, that tool was used to shape who believes they are powerful and who does not. But you are here, right now, watching this, which means the erasure did not fully work. The curiosity survived. The hunger for truth survived, and that is its own form of power. The women we talked about today, Hatshepsut, Hypatia, Hildegard, they did not disappear. They were hidden, and there is a profound difference between those two things. What is hidden can be found. What is erased can be restored. And what is restored becomes part of who you are. So here is your assignment. Learn one name today that history tried to forget. Say it out loud. Share it with someone. Because reclaiming history is not just an academic exercise, it is an act of power. And class is always in session.